Welcome back, everyone. We'll get started straight away with our next panel session. We're going to be talking electrification with our panel debate called The Electric Switch. And here to chair the debate is BBC broadcaster Justin Webb.
Thank you very much. One simple question, I suppose. If that car that's just been flashing up above us is going to be enjoyed and bought and driven, two things have to happen, don't they? Number one, well, I suppose they're linked things, but number one is people have got to be attracted to the idea of having one. They've got to want to buy it. Number two, once they've bought it, they've got to be able to get somewhere in it. And those two things are going to be the kind of the powertrain of our discussion for the next 25 minutes or so. We are very, very open to questions, though, and to being driven in a direction that you want to drive us in. So you've all got the app and the wherewithal, haven't you, to ask questions. Do feel absolutely free to do it. Those questions will come through to me, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And if you have them quite early on, then I'm perfectly willing to stick them sort of centrally in our debate. Let me very, very briefly introduce our panel. You've got longer bios, I think, are available, but we've got a really genuinely diverse group of people coming at this subject from various places, but exactly in a sense mirroring the way in which people are going to come at this subject from various places with varying degrees of expertise, enthusiasm, etc. On my right over there is Mei Ikuzawa, who is a brand consultant and creative director. She is also, I should point out though, a part-time stunt driver. Is that right, Mei?
Right.
Okay, so we'll leave that hanging there for the moment. Katie Tunstall, singer-songwriter, also very much a fan of electric cars and an owner of one for some time. Guido Reinking, journalist and automotive expert, and particularly automotive expert on things German. And that, of course, when you're talking about the car industry, is a very important aspect of all of this. Johnny Smith on my left here, motoring journalist, broadcaster, car enthusiast. He describes himself.
I like to think so.
What we used to call petrol head, but we won't call petrol head for the purposes of this debate. Next in Richard Bruce, who's Director of Energy Technology and Innovation at the UK Department of Transport. In other words, it will be down to him whether we can drive these damn things around the country or not. And then finally, last but not least, Ian Callum, who's Jaguar's Director of Design. The designer of this wonderful Jaguar car, the I-Pace. I mean, I suppose the first question is probably for you, Ian. Is that the last? Is it the last petrol-engined car that you're ever going to design?
Well, that's electric, actually. Yes, I've said it a few times recently. I've probably worked on my last full internal combustion car, and that was probably done and been. You probably haven't seen it yet, but it's done and been as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I think most cars I do from now on, if not all cars, will be in some way either partially electric or fully electric.
In some way, but hybrid for into the long-term future?
Some hybrid, yes. And I think this is a bit of a, the jury's still out on this. And of course, one of the issues all the car companies have is we're kind of double guessing when this jump is going to happen. So we need to accommodate just about every aspect of electrification that we can for the interim period. And it's difficult, it's hugely complicated. But yes, I think we're going to see hybrids for a few years yet. But in some point in the future, it will all move to pure electric. When that date is, I wouldn't want to guess, but I personally think it'll be within 10 years.
And Richard, if that date is to be within 10 years, then people will need to be able to drive them around and to charge them up. To what extent are we going to be ready for this to happen? And I'm not just thinking about petrol station, or what we currently call petrol station charging, but also home.
I think to some extent we're ready today. The number of cars we've got on the road today, it's about 110,000 now on UK's roads. We've got about 11,000 charge points. If you want to charge it at home, we've got off-street parking. It's pretty easy. That sort of works. There's around 1,000 rapid chargers in the UK already. It all depends on the speed of uptake. If it's a hockey stick and suddenly this goes boff, then no, I don't think we are ready. But if it's more proportionate measured, then we probably will be. The energy companies know it's coming. Infrastructure companies know it's coming. Lots of investment going into rapid charge points at the moment.
Enough investment?
Well, interestingly, there's a show happening at the moment up in Millbrook, and the infrastructure guys there said to us, we don't want any more government money in this, because we've got all this money ready to spend. You might muddy the waters for us, so potentially, yeah. I think the key issue is the difference between the infrastructure you need to actually run the cars and what people think they need. They are two different things.
Yeah.
And at the moment, what they think they need isn't out there. That's clearly the case. But actually what they really need is a plug at home overnight. If you can do that, then that covers most people's needs. And you need a good, rapid network for those longer journeys.
Johnny.
Hello.
I mean, you were nodding there. Is there a sense in which the public actually don't understand or have a different conception of the kind of problems that they will have from the actual issues that need to be resolved?
Yeah, well, I think the first things first is it's an educational process, because you're weaning yourself off fuel and going the habit of going to a fuel station and buying chewing gum and water or whatever you buy. And the thing is people can't be bothered to think about the alternative. Even though we've got really handy things like, the car intelligently will tell you where you can charge at all times. It will give you various pointers of when you should pull over, and of course you've got rapid charging systems. And realistically, when I say to people, they say, "Oh, but even a rapid charge system, it's going to take 45 minutes to charge." I'm like, well, I've got a family. If I pull over on the motorway to stop, by the time the children have gone to the toilet, I've queued and got a coffee, all of that faffing has taken place. That is 45 minutes typically anyway. And it depends. It depends, because the thing...
You obviously really like petrol stations and
the
ability to savour them that is possibly...
I like petrol stations. I've got three electric cars, actually. So I don't call myself a petrol head, because it's a bit of an old term. And I like all kinds of propulsion. So I like to think I'm in a position where I've lived with hybrids, plug-in hybrids, EVs, and big old dinosaur piston motors.
Gideon, how is Germany coping with the infrastructure issue?
Well, we have in Germany now 25,000 charging stations. That means 3 electric cars share one charging station. You can say that's enough, but many people are concerned that they don't find one when they need it. This is one reason why people don't buy electric cars in Germany in a bigger mood, because just less than 1% of the cars sold last year were electric cars, and I think there's a reason for that. They don't fit to the need of the people. That's very easy. People want to buy a car where they can visit their family, their relatives, go to holiday, drive for on the weekend somewhere, or drive to the daily to the work. And that's not. I can't see there are not many electric cars on the market that fit to those needs.
Katie, they don't fit people's needs.
Well, it depends where you live. Yeah. That's definitely a big point. And I now reside in California. So it's a very different experience, I think, having an electric car living in Los Angeles, where, you see them all the time, for starters. There's a lot of electric car pickup in California. And in terms of going on holiday, if you're going on a driving holiday within California, absolutely no problem. There's charging stations all up and down the state, and it will show you on your car, you can plan your trip around that. And as Johnny said, you're also in America, you're driving very long distances, so you are every 2 or 3 hours, which is pretty much you've got 260 miles on a Tesla, which is what I drive. Yeah. You want to stop for 45 minutes after driving for that amount of time. So I've found it very easy, but it has been on my mind in the UK as I'm going around in a taxi or whatever, I wonder how it works. And I've seen a few Teslas around, but I do wonder how it works, particularly if you don't have off-street parking. It's definitely an issue still.
Well, how do we persuade people? How do car companies persuade people? How do those who are fans of electric cars persuade people that they are exciting?
Well, I think the industry has been marketing EVs as something about the environment, saving the environment. But what about for me? What is there for me if I save the planet? And I think that's the way we have to move forward. This is a really good time to move and create something totally new, like a revolution in transportation. And not to look at a car as a compromise to a petrol car. So maybe cross-pollinate with other industries like the music industry, technology from gaming, or something to personalize and make it a little bit different. I think the problem now is that we're missing the fun in electric car driving. There's always the anxiety, oh, but where am I going to stop? And, but I think, well, let's focus on what we're doing. And this is a new product. When the Apple iPhone came out and there's no buttons, we weren't like, oh no, what are we going to do? We just embraced it and moved forward. So I think EVs is, let's try it as something new. And let's not focus too much on the environment so much. We all know that it's important and critical that we stop using hydrocarbons or whatever. But, we can do something that's really, really innovative now, because the engine's not going to be in the front of the car or whatever. We could totally change the spec.
Oh, yeah. Packaging of cars. Yeah.
I mean, does the packaging then influence people? I mean, where is the crossover between exactly, as Kay says, this? It's a thing for the environment. I have bought a thing to be good. Where does the crossover from that to I bought a thing because it says something about me and I want to look this, that, or the other, which you associate with car ownership? We were just talking about it before, actually. I want to come to Ian in a second. But where does that crossover happen?
Well, there's several things here, really. About 15 years ago, you probably remember when hybrids started becoming really mainstream. But before that, they were seen as being very left field and very odd and a little bit holier than thou. And now there's hybrids everywhere, and nobody even takes any notice of them. They're just a thing. And I think you can either buy an electric car because you're trying to make an environmental statement, or the way I came at an electric car was they're actually very, very enjoyable cars to drive, but in a totally different way. If you're driving one as an everyday commuter car, most people want a quiet car as a piece of refinement. Rolls-Royce have just spent the last 100 years trying to make a quiet engine. I can tell you how to do it. You make the bloody thing electric. You want it to be quick, really, 100% torque from 0 RPM. You make it electric. The problem is people who've never driven electric cars don't really know what to expect. And I think once you grab these people who are skeptical and put them in an electric car and say, just try it. Just take it away and try it. It's actually quite addictive.
Yeah.
We designed the I-Pace. I had this car in my mind for many years before electric cars were even probably thought of in mass terms. And the electric car gave me an opportunity to do something which I wasn't able to do before on the design team, which was a kind of cab forward, super hatchback, really. I believe that Tesla is successful because the car looks quite good. I think it gives people the excuse. Yeah, it is good.
Do you think it looks good?
I think it looks good. Yeah.
I don't think any Teslas look good.
Oh, I think it looks. The S
I think they're a great piece of technology. I don't think they look very good.
The S looks good.
Hang on, what do you like about it, and then what do you not like? Just quickly.
I just think it's quite a
We're going down a cul-de-sac now. We'll have to reverse out. Well, what's
I think
good about
the Tesla is actually quite a handsome sedan. The big one, the X, is rather dubious, I have to say. But the S is a rather handsome sedan, and Elon Musk wanted it actually to look a bit like a Jag. I know that because he told me. And
foolishly, it would seem.
And I think it's quite a handsome, large sedan. And I think a lot of people are happy to buy it because it's actually a decent-looking car.
It's a handsome, large sedan.
If it was odd-looking...
I do like handsome, large sedans, if that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, but you've got a 62 Chevy. I mean, that's different sort of sedan.
I mean, but what's great about, and Ian will be able to tell it better than me, but the electric cars can rewrite the rule book for how you package and design and engineer a car. Because for years and years, you've had the engine in a certain place, and you've had a transmission tunnel where the drive shafts go, and you've had all of this architecture. And the great thing about electric cars is you can open the space inside a car much more. And there's been concepts over the last decade or so exploring this idea of a sort of mobile lounge rather than...
Yes, scatter cushions. I was at a conference recently with an electric car of the future was shown with scatter cushions. Katie, is that the moment you're waiting?
Listen, Johnny. The Tesla is a super sexy car.
You think it's sexy?
It's super sexy car.
Maybe it's how you drive it.
I was a little nervous about going for it because it has got a slightly executive feel about it. And I drove a Porsche, and I really very much enjoyed driving a sports car. I had a 911. It was really enjoyable, but I didn't feel good about driving a gas-guzzling car. And driving the Tesla, I mean, you've got the settings, you can change how it feels when you're driving it. It's amazing to drive. And everyone who comes to visit me just wants to get straight in the car.
And Kai, for the inside, that's the outside of the car and the outside look. And that for the inside, it is interesting, isn't it? The changes that will be potentially made, where the car can be organised architecturally differently.
The opportunities are endless, I think. You know, you could put speakers in certain places. The steering could be, you know, totally different format. Maybe it could even move if your passenger could drive halfway. I don't know, it could slide over. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. But yes, the form could totally change. And maybe there's, you know, people complain, but what about the V12 noise and whatever? Maybe there's a different way of, you know, developing a sound that's superb, that is for the electric era. You know?
Well, excuse me, but I mean, you're right. I mean, Elon Musk did so much right with the Tesla. It's a good-looking car. It's a well-made car. It is. It drives fantastic.
It really does.
Acceleration is really outstanding. But we should not forget that Tesla has a So that means the Swedish Environmental Institute has done a study last month saying that you need to drive years to save the CO2 you have to put into the production of the battery. That means the Tesla is a nice car, no question about it, but it will not save the world. It will even not save the world because it's very expensive. And the last reason the electric car at all will not save it is that all cars together produce just 9% of the CO2 of a society like
a very valid
British
point.
or the. I mean, it's 9%.
Yeah, it's true.
We are talking about 9%.
Can I just take issue with some of that?
Do, Richard.
So I think that Swedish study's been somewhat debunked. There's lots of other studies clearly showing that EVs are far better across the entire life cycle. So the car, using the car, disposing of the car. Also, it's very easy to get obsessed with just carbon or think about other pollutants that are a bit of an issue in our cities at the moment. And these vehicles produce nothing. So, yeah, the reason...
Nothing out of the tailpipe, but a bit out of the tyres, don't they? Which is an issue that some people are concerned
brake
about.
dust as well, because they have regenerative braking. You know, they are. I think it's pretty. They are a better thing. You know, they don't get the car from multi-step entirely.
No.
But the reason most of the countries are pushing for more EVs is because they are better for their citizens and for the planet as a whole. They're not perfect, but they are better.
It's the wheel to
Yeah,
ride.
I understand all that, you know, and we go from the kind of from the origins to the final result, and there's a lot of dubious situations about where the power's coming from, coal power station, etc., etc. We understand all that. I think the point of electric car is a starting point. It is purely a starting point. We have to resolve all the other issues it creates and how we get to that point. I know there's going to be a demand on electric. I know there's going to be a demand much beyond what we use today. But we have to start somewhere, and I think this is a starting point.
Yeah, it feels like a very intense position of transition of going. And Johnny and I were talking earlier that you've seen pictures of cars in 1905 being plugged in and that drive 30 miles. There's no way that there has been a free market for the development of battery life over the last 100 years. There's no way that's been a free
And New York in the turn of the century has many electric cars in it as internal combustion engine cars, believe it or not. And they weren't allowed to develop because guess what? The fuel companies got ahead of them.
Yeah,
and that's what drove what we know today.
Go back to Neil's point. The number of people who are going to buy an EV because it's better for the environment is unfortunately quite small. I know this because I've been charged a plug-in car grant. In the early years, there were hardly any cars being sold because they were expensive, they didn't go very far. Some of them weren't that great, to be honest. But the reason people buy them is because, in many respects, they are better. They are nicer to drive, they are fast, they are silent, they are smooth, and the running costs are a tenth.
Well, that's interesting you should bring that up because we've got a few questions here, and one of the questions, a really interesting one about running costs. So with more vehicles going electric, this question I asked, won't demand for electricity and therefore prices go up? Will we end up paying more to charge our cars than we do now filling them with petrol?
It depends on when you charge them.
Yeah.
Yes.
The idea behind this is to charge your electric car when, for example, the wind is blowing and all the wind energy is coming in, but nobody needs it. So this is the right moment to charge your electric car.
So the pricing will force you into charging at various times of the day,
For example.
or potentially you think this questioner might be right. You will be paying a premium price that probably isn't much different from petrol. True?
Force you. I think there'll be a choice of tariffs, and it's more interesting this actually because it could be a really good thing for the energy system because you might be able to get energy from the car back into the grid to shave off some of the peak. So you can store energy. There's a lot of storage capacity in the car battery. You can power a house for 2 days with a Nissan Leaf battery. So there's stuff you can do. It's not just about we need to put a big load of extra energy demand on the peak. You'll nudge people towards the off-peak and towards the night time. And then you can maybe use the cars during the day, maybe to take energy when there's excess generation from solar.
But this person's not completely wrong to say you call it a nudge, I say four. I mean, if there will be moments of the day, potentially, where you could be paying quite a big price for this fuel in order to discourage you from taking it from the grid.
I think you'll be missing out on the opportunity of a discount rather than.
Yes, very nicely.
I think the interesting thing is, and this is something that I need to kind of point towards your guys, is that at some point when we're not buying any more fuel every day and the government's not getting all the tax, how do you then tax cars? You can't really do it by electricity to that extent because it's you can't have red electricity, can you? Like,
Red diesel.
Like red diesel, yeah. So it's got to be by mileage, isn't it?
Yeah, or that's when it encourages you to be more self-sufficient.
And does there ever come a point, as we all read in the papers, I don't know, just a month or so ago now, wasn't it? The idea, this probably doesn't apply in Germany, but everyone in Britain has tea at 3:30 and they put on the kettle. And the idea was that the whole thing would blow. We just wouldn't have, I mean, is that,
So that was
tell me that's true, because it'd be wonderful if it was.
It's not true.
Oh dear.
So the National Grid did a whole bunch of scenarios work. They looked at some pretty extreme scenarios. And if you had quite a low power connection to your house, and you had a high power charger, and you probably had a power shower, and you put the kettle on at the same time, you'd be under those circumstances. Most houses, it's not an issue at all.
We will be able to cope.
They're investing all the time. They know this is coming.
Just an allied question to this. I think another important one. 66% of property in London, that's admirably precise, has no garage or driveway. Costs a lot of money to install a public charge point, etc., etc. What do we do about paying for the infrastructure to be there? We touched on it earlier on. I mean, your experience in the States, where you think of everything private being brilliant and everything public being completely awful. How does that work? I speak as a former BBC North American, properly impartial, but I'm a great lover of America. But that is a fact, isn't it? That it is difficult sometimes in America to get public things up to a decent state.
Definitely. And I'm very lucky. I have a garage, so I can charge my car when I go home. I still am not sure how residents in LA who don't have garages are really effectively charging their electric cars. I mean, because there isn't a sort of grid of residential charging points. But there's certainly people using them. So whether it's working that there's somewhere where they work, I have to say that when you go to shopping malls or the gym or any public building that has a car park, there's usually a charging point. Right. And there's usually several charging points.
And is that what we're going to get to, and who will pay?
So the issue is, in the UK, around 60% of houses have got off-street parking. It's the 40%. And of the strategic challenges, this is probably up there, probably number 2, below energy. Probably number 2. The issue actually isn't money at the moment, and we've had a grant scheme available for local authorities to pay for resident parking points, these charging points, for a long time. Uptake is really, really low, and it isn't because there isn't the consumers wanting to do it, it's because the local authorities, or where parking is a big issue for residents, don't want to take a bay out of general use and make it dedicated. So you can see a world where every parking space is a charge point, and you can see where none have. It's a bit in between, it's quite hard to manage. But there are things like putting sockets on lampposts, which is happening now in London.
That's a great idea.
Which is quite, it's low cost. You don't need a very high power connection to charge a car at night. And you can see cheap, low cost sockets every other parking bay in residence areas, or you have local neighbourhood rapid charge points.
And another question that someone's asked, which we naturally go on to then, what about having it done wirelessly on the road.
Oh, induction charging.
Yeah, realistic, unrealistic, what?
In driveways, it's realistic, yes. In garages, it's realistic.
For overnight stuff.
But
for overnight
on the
stuff.
road?
But on the road, well,
Wirelessly?
I personally don't know.
Yeah. From what I've read and spoken to businesses who develop it, the amount of charge that it gives you when you're at the lights and that kind of thing is so small, and the cost of that technology, you're better off spending that money on the R&D of batteries and having power denser batteries, and then you've got better range.
Okay.
It's very interesting for heavier vehicles, trucks, and that
Yes.
sort of stuff, where you might want to give them some power so they can go further electrically and that sort of stuff. Or there's a bus system running in Korea now that has wireless charging at certain points on the night.
Yeah, so possibly on a motorway with a
Well, it's static, if it's still, if it stops.
So like London.
yeah, but on a large space in a motorway service station, you could do it.
Sort of test track.
Yeah.
Where maybe it would be in one is different.
Okay.
So like congestion charge of London, it would probably work.
Yeah. Well, it feels like that's one for the future. Not entirely discounted, but not entirely here either. Here's a question for you, UK. Will electric cars ever become classics in their own right? Can we imagine the classic electric car, something like an E-Type Jag? People look back and say, oh, that was a wonderful... Well, we already have a vote for the Tesla over there, actually. But can you do better than that?
Well, almost. It's good looking, but it's not the best.
I think this battery power is something that's really transitional. I think the next technology is coming so soon, I think, that this battery EV, or whatever you want to call it, will become a future classic so soon. I think a Prius, we hate to see them around London so much. But if you buy a brand new one today, I'm sure that'll be a great classic for the future.
I have a classic electric car.
Which is?
An Enfield 8000, a car which no one remembers in the world, really.
Anyone here?
Made on the Isle of Wight
anyone?
just before the oil crisis in the early 70s. They made 120 of them.
Yes, but Johnny, yours is not.
But I turned it into an electric hot rod. So I took the idea of old electric car, put 21st century electric technology in it, and because I wanted to explore the idea of electric cars being interesting.
Yeah.
And this was the argument, because people were saying to me, because it doesn't make a sound, it can't be that much fun.
Yes.
There was a time when it was not clear if the electric car, the petrol car, or the steam car would be the future. That was around 1900.
Well, a steam car would make a noise a bit like an electric car in a way, with that kind of whistle.
Well,
Yeah, I've never had a steam car.
Like a kettle.
Well, I think I've got one.
have one of-
Someone has asked, in fact, actually, what happens to a car's character? This is probably another one to throw to you. What happens to a car's character when the noise it makes is only a whistle? The roar of the F-Type would be a thing of the past. Isn't sound bound up with the attractiveness of the vehicle, or is that just a sort of
I
silly
think
thing?
that's
the passing
nostalgia. I think nostalgia, of course we love the V12. You know, you switch on an Aston Martin and you kind of curl up in your driver's seat. But I think that's what I mean. I think this is a new car, a new product. So I don't know, think of the films, the movies, the Star Wars. I don't know what those aircrafts are called, but you know, we could create a new sound maybe.
But
you have to
all
create
our
a sound.
phones make a shutter noise when we take a photo. It doesn't need to make that noise. And so I was actually quite surprised that there wasn't more option technology that you can have sound in the car
There will be.
through your amazing speaker
will be.
system. you know.
Personalization, I think. I
Yeah.
think people are so into personalization, whether it's kind of panels that change color or sounds that you could personalize. I think there's a future in developing this.
It's a millennial
as an
thing.
option.
You think it's a millennial?
I totally think it's people who are less prejudiced, younger people who don't have the backlog, the history of knowing what it was like, different petrol engines, living with them. For example, in my case, my kids fight over who's going to plug my car in and my wife's car in when we get home. And they want to plug it in. They love the idea of it, they like the process of it, they like it being quiet but fast. They know that just because it doesn't make a sound doesn't mean to say it's devoid of character. It's good for other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the character side of it is very important. And I've been driving electric cars, and there's this sort of disappointment because you don't have the roar of a V8 rather than a V12.
Sorry.
But you know, it's just a different way of looking at it. And actually, it's quite a serene feeling that you're driving something that's very quiet. As you say, Rolls-Royce have tried 100 years to get a quiet car. It does have a pacifying element to it, which I find quite restful. And even though you're driving quite quickly on it. The sound element is actually quite interesting because one thing, you can pump sound into a car, and cars do that already. They pump fake sound in to make it sound more powerful than it really is. But the sound outside is going to become an issue because you imagine if 50% of the cars were electric out there, you won't hear them coming. And I think inevitably there will be some sort of legislation towards them. So then you get into downloads of what the
legislation to enforce sound in.
I think it's going to happen. Yes, I think eventually.
Americans talk about it.
But it's very easy to have some sort of sensor system that if you are close to someone, it doesn't have to make noise all the time. And I think, you know, one thing to also think about with the fact that perhaps it's a very low amount of CO2 that's actually being released by the car industry at the same time, the welfare of living in a city, the personal well-being of living in a city without traffic noise would be immense. It would completely change your experience of living in a city not having to hear traffic all the time.
Justin, 2 points. So one, there is moves to regulate to make sound generation compulsory.
Oh.
So below 12 miles an hour, as it turns out, most of the noise of a car that you can hear as a pedestrian is the engine. Above 12 miles an hour, it's generally the tyres. So on the motorway, you hear the tyres. Yeah. So it's the low speed. So probably in Geneva, they're talking about having low speed, quiet noise. So those who have hearing impediments or blind people can see hear the car coming. But Katie's point about what it might do to our town and cities is utterly transformative. If you walk down a city street, even around here, and the amount of noise that comes from vehicles, okay, a lot of it might be trucks and stuff, but it's going to be utterly transformative to our spaces, our public places.
And what Ian was saying about the serenity of driving an electric car is very true. It's a very calming experience, but it's not lacking in excitement. You feel like you're in the future. It's amazing. And it's really exciting, and everyone I've taken in the car is just going, whoa!
Yeah. But also, are we too obsessed as well with the idea of ownership? Because among the many things that are changing, this is after all only one of them, we're looking at automation, but we're also looking, if we are looking at automation, then of changes in the model for ownership of cars, whether all of that sort of comes together and actually the electric side of it then just becomes, if it works really well, then that in itself is all the attraction you need. Guido?
Well, I think, I'm sure that people want to own something. I mean, this is so deep in our mind that we want to own something which we think it's attractive, that I don't believe that sharing is the next big thing. Autonomous driving, yes, that might be the next big thing because it gives you so much convenience. It gives you time, which is for many people the most valuable they have. It's not money, but time, even for the wealth people. But sharing in Munich, we have 800,000 cars on the road, and we have all the big car sharing organizations like Car2Go and Drive Now there, and just 1,700 of those 800,000 are shared cars. So it's a nice thing. It's a nice opportunity for someone who lives in the city, has no parking space to use a car, but I think it's not the big thing for the next time.
Ian?
Yeah, ownership's an interesting thing, but it's in our psyche to want to own beautiful things, and I think as long as people like my design team can create beautiful things, people will want to own them. And I know it sounds a bit self-indulgent, but it's true. You don't want to go and hire your suit all the time. You want to wear your own clothes. You want to live in your own house if you can. You want to personalize it, and therefore ownership is a very big part of people's lives. I think there will be a time when a generation doesn't necessarily want to own everything, but I think it'll be a long time before people actually give up the ownership of a car. And it's your own personal space. I was just talking to people earlier on about the fact that they love to get into a car and drive it for 2 or 3 hours because it's their own personal space. But personal space means it has to be personal. And you don't want other people's crisp wrappers lying on the floor when you get into it. Your own kids, maybe, but not other people's kids. So it's an interesting psychology, this. But I do believe people will still want to own their car.
But it is terribly important, isn't it, when it comes to electric cars? Because if you are looking at something, all that stuff that we started with about it needing to be attractive and sexy and in some way inclusive of people's desires, that wouldn't be necessary if it was commonly owned. It is necessary if it's still the same model.
No, I think it's still necessary. I think even people are choosing to own a car for a day or use a car for a day or an evening or a weekend, their choice will still be determined by emotional levels and not just function. I'm quite convinced by that.
I think ownership will persist, especially in Ian's end of the market. I'm not sure elsewhere, especially in urban areas. People want mobility. They want to get from A to B. That's what they want. And the way they do that at the moment is to own a car and use a car. And as the price of the sort of the upfront cost of cars has gone up, people have said, well, do I need to do this? Especially public transport's got better and that sort of stuff. There's a stat that more people download the Uber app now than buy a new car every week.
Well, I was going to say that in LA, I've been reading that articles about people in Los Angeles giving up their cars, which you would never imagine in a million years, but people are actually giving up their cars because it's cheaper to use Uber, and they can get an Uber within 3 minutes, any time of the day, every single day, and they don't need to worry about parking. They don't, and you know, as long as there's standards with the cars.
They don't have to worry about charging it either, I suppose.
No, but if you think about having a fleet of, you know, electric cars in a service like Uber, driverless cars that are picking you up.
There's definitely a space for that. I've noticed, especially in urban areas. I absolutely agree with that, and I think with the millennial generation, that is very much. But I can't help but believe that, you know, the need to have something more than just that in people's lives will prevail.
Okay, final question, good one to end on. Has Katie written a song or been inspired to write a song in her EV? This is the real test.
In my car?
In your car.
Who asked that? Do you know, the answer is yes.
Oh.
The answer is yes, because I had moved to Los Angeles just to change life, change continents, new start. And I didn't think I was going to make music for a while. I thought I was going to take some time out from making records. And it was driving around Mulholland Drive, all the canyon roads, listening to Fleetwood Mac and Tom Petty on my amazing sound system that made me write my next record. And driving, I think, is just it's a very singular experience, and I absolutely love it. And it's probably where I listen to music more than anywhere else, is in the car. That's where I've really got to know my favorite albums. It's definitely a life experience, getting in a car, and I love to drive. So
sold. Thank you very much to all of our panel. We're going to take a break for 20 minutes now, please, but a round of applause, please, for everyone. Thank you all very much. And thank you for your questions as well.